What made the chief of medicine tell me I had 3 weeks before my entire skeleton would collapse inward like a crushed soda can? I'd been an ultramarathon runner for 12 years straight since I was 19, logging 40 miles daily through desert heat and mountain snow without a single rest day. I'd gone from 160 down to 98 pounds despite being 6 feet tall, and I felt proud of achieving what my coach called perfect efficiency. The running community knew me as the guy who could maintain sub 5-minute miles for 100 straight miles, and honestly, I'd structured my entire existence around that identity. I finally needed a physical for insurance after avoiding doctors for years. The nurse kept complimenting my cardiovascular fitness while taking my vitals, saying my resting heart rate of 32 was lower than Olympic athletes she'd tested. The doctor started the routine examination, checking reflexes with his rubber hammer while asking about my training schedule. He tapped my shin to test bone reflexes and immediately froze. He tapped again, and the sound that came back wasn't the dull thud of normal bone, but this high, hollow echo that rang through the examination room. He pressed his thumb against my tibia, and I watched his face go white as the bone actually dented inward under the pressure before slowly popping back out like pressed foam. He stuck his head out the door and called down the hall for help, his voice cracking. 3 doctors rushed in and watched him demonstrate the denting again. One grabbed a pen light and pressed it against my skin, and we could all see the light glowing through the bone like shining a flashlight through paper. The orthopedic surgeon started pressing along my legs and suddenly jerked his hands back, saying, "I can feel them flexing with your heartbeat. The bones are actually bending with each pulse." They brought a portable x-ray machine right to the examination room because they said I needed imaging immediately. The x-rays showed bones that were almost transparent with walls so thin you could see the shadow of blood vessels through them. The inside was completely hollow, except for these delicate struts that looked like spider silk holding the shape. The orthopedist measured the bone walls at less than 1 millimeter thick in some places. He said, "One fall and every bone in your body will shatter like glass. You're a catastrophic failure waiting to happen." Their scanner couldn't even register my bone density because it was below the machine's ability to detect. The chief of medicine arrived and had me lie perfectly still while he placed an ultrasound on my chest. We watched the screen as my ribs visibly bent inward with each breath, the hollow bones too weak to maintain their shape against basic atmospheric pressure. He pressed gently on my sternum and it flexed down almost an inch before he quickly released it. He said, "Your skeleton is collapsing in real time. The bones are so hollow they can't support their own structure anymore." An endocrinologist studied my running logs and calculated that I'd been in extreme caloric deficit for over 4,000 consecutive days. She explained that my body had cannibalized the bones from the inside, dissolving the calcium to fuel my muscles, leaving just these paper-thin shells. But what terrified her was that the process was accelerating. She showed me comparative x-rays from a broken arm I'd had 5 years ago, and the bones were twice as thick then. The sports medicine specialist looked at the deterioration rate and said I had maybe 3 weeks before the bones would be too thin to support any weight at all. They attempted an emergency bone marrow biopsy, but the needle just kept hitting empty space. When they finally extracted something, it was just air and dried tissue fragments. The hematologist said, "You have essentially no immune system left. Any infection could kill you within days." The orthopedic surgeon had me stand and walk across the room, and everyone could hear my bones creaking and whistling with each step. He grabbed my wrist to check my pulse and accidentally compressed the bones together, his fingers meeting through my arm before he yanked his hand away in horror. They tried emergency interventions with IV calcium and hormones to trigger bone growth, but monitoring showed the bones were actually getting thinner during treatment. My body had forgotten how to build bone and could only dissolve what remained. The endocrinologist said, "Your metabolism has turned cannibalistic. It's eating you from the inside and it can't stop." She explained that the cells that build bone were completely dead, and once they shut down this long, they could never restart. The chief of medicine finally pulled everyone together and turned to me with this expression I'll never forget. He said, "You're going to collapse inward like a crushed soda can. Your bones are maybe 3 weeks away from being unable to support your organs. Your ribcage will fold in and crush your lungs. Your spine will compress and sever your spinal cord. You've turned yourself into something that can't survive." They wanted to admit me immediately and put me in a medical immobilization frame to prevent any movement that could cause cascade failure. They discharged me only after I signed forms acknowledging that I was leaving against medical advice and understood that any impact could be fatal. That night, my girlfriend hugged me and pulled back in horror, saying she'd felt my ribs compress and could hear them creaking. The worst part was knowing that I'd done this to myself, that every mile I'd run had dissolved a little more of my skeleton until I'd become this hollow thing pretending to be human. I could feel my bones getting thinner by the hour and wondered if I'd make it through the night without folding inward into nothing.